Hey guys, welcome to the second part of the video variation of the Budapest Gambit. So we were looking at the E3 variation. In the previous video we got an introduction to what the Budapest Gambit looks like, and then we were looking at the E3 variation. So continuing from here, I wanted to show you the sub variations of this opening so that you could be we would be thorough in the analysis that we perform here. So after e3, we played d6 and we looked at the bishop d3 variation in detail, and we ended up with possibly winning positions in every sub variation. After bishop d3, it was nc5. So if white didn't play bishop d3 and if they chose to play queen c2, we could continue here with bishop f5. The main idea with bishop f5 is not only defending this knight on e4, but also threatening to move the knight elsewhere, like to g3 for example, and attacking the rook and the queen from this bishop simultaneously. So that's the main intention of bishop f5, guys. It's mostly to move the knight to another place and then attack simultaneously. And if white played something like a3 for example, to prevent the knight from coming to b4, then we would play knight g3 as I explained earlier, and after queen b3 we could just capture the rook and we are easily winning. And if white played bishop d3, which is possibly the best move in the position, we could continue with nb4. After queen a4 check, we could play nc6, bishop e4, bishop e4. White cannot castle here, because if white did, we could just capture, and we can play d takes e5 here. It's a pretty solid position for black, especially considering the king's file to be open, and it's still the middle game. So with the king file open and with our pieces still on the board, we can put a lot of pressure, and then there's obviously the double pawn disadvantage which we can target on, and we have a pretty good position here, guys. So after bishop takes, we play bishop takes e4, and it's a good position for us. So the other possible variations from here is to play castling right now. So if they played castles right now, we would win a piece right away by playing knight c5. This is the original threat of the variation, playing knight c5. This is attacked and the bishop is attacked as well. So that if the queen moves to a certain position right now, like queen a3, we can just capture the bishop, like bishop takes d3, and after rook e1, we can just capture this pawn as well. And we are easily winning here, guys. And we looked at this variation too. So obviously the queen c2 sub variation is not giving white any kind of advantage. It's mostly just leading white to positions that's making it more cramped and awkward. So white is really doing poorly in this position. So after bishop f5, if white continued with queen a4, then we would just capture the pawn on e5, and after knight takes e5, we would play bishop b4 check. If white cannot play knight d2 here, since this would happen, so it's a checkmate, and white obviously cannot continue with knight d2, nor can white continue with knight c3, because knight takes c3, pawn takes. This is hanging as well afterwards. So it's easily winning for black, and then this is hanging too. So it's easily winning for black here, guys. So obviously there was a lot of trouble after knight takes e5, bishop b4 check. Now the only other variation for white to continue here is by playing king e2. And if king e2, we can play knight c5. Do you see that? Do you see the strong outpost for the knight on c5, guys? This is usually played in every variation after e3, in the e3 variation. And this one usually puts a lot of pressure. And now this is attacked if this queen is moved elsewhere. So the only position for white to go to is d5. And now we play bishop d3 check. If white captured, check. And this is the only move for white here. We can play a check. King g3. We can play knight d4 check. The only move for white is king h4. We can retrieve back the bishop and finish the game eventually. Not immediately. I'm sorry. So this is all it is, guys. So this variation would lead us into a winning position as well. So there's not much analysis to be done in this variation too. So after e3, d6, the queen c2 variation was completely looked into, and we had winning positions almost every time. So the other way white could continue playing here is by playing something like bishop e2. Bishop e2 is something that we already looked into. That was, we played knight takes e5, and then we had a pretty good position. So the other variations could be knight d2, trying to like get the knight out of the outpost, which is on e4, and then possibly exchanging the pieces and giving away the pawn on e5, because white wouldn't probably want to care about the pawn advantage or the pawn disadvantage. They're mostly caring about the exchanging of the pieces on the center, so that white gets a pretty good grip on the center as well. So if after knight takes knight d2, we can play bishop f5. This is a pretty good move, and if white captured, we can capture it with the bishop, still having the outpost on e4, controlling the center. And now if white played bishop e2, we can obviously capture back the pawn with knight takes e5, and then it's an equal position. This is an equal position, guys. Queen takes d1, rook takes d1, f6. It's an equal position with a slight advantage because of the bishop's mobility. This bishop is still on c1, it is underdeveloped, and then this pawn e3 is hindering the development of the bishop on c1. So we have a slight advantage. So apart from that, it was pretty much equal with a slight advantage. So e3, d6, and we looked at nbd2 variation. After nbd2, we play bishop f5, knight captures, and then if white played pawn takes pawn, we would capture it with the bishop, and if white played bishop e2 now, we would play queen f6, and the idea remains the same. The idea is g5, h5, castling on the queen side. So if white castled for now, then we would castle on the queen side. So the idea is to threaten white by moving away the bishop elsewhere and then controlling the d file. So if white played a3, for example, we would just play bishop takes h2 check, or even bishop f3, bishop f3, bishop h2 check. After king takes h2, we would capture the queen. It's easily winning for black. And after 000, if white played g3 in order to prevent black from playing bishop takes h2, then we could still play bishop takes g3. And after queen b3, we can play bishop d6, just retrieve back the bishop. This knight is now under attack, has to retrieve to a position which is not at all comfortable, and then queen g6 check. The only move for white different from this check is by bringing this bishop in. After queen takes g4 check, white's only move is bringing the knight now, and now we capture the knight. So it's a checkmate, and that's it, guys. So it was completely futile for white, to play the knight bd2 variation in order to try to control the center. So knight bd2 didn't do much. So we looked at the bishop d3 variation, we looked at the bishop e2 variation, nbd2 variation, pawn takes pawn variation, and then we almost covered all the logical variations of the position, guys. And all of these sub variations would normally lead black to very good positions, and we analyzed almost each and every sub variation in depth. And that's it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.